Nope. Hello everyone, we're back with Total Warhammer 3 Speculation Weeks. This time we're doing the Chaos Dawi, or the Dawi Tsar. We're going to be going through why they're a bit awkward in terms of lore for the Legendary Lords. We're going to go through who we think the Legendary Lords are, and then we're going to do our usual unit speculation. So hopefully that should be good. Do you want to say hi, Griff?
Hello everybody.
Nice. So we'll begin with going through... Do you want to go through Chaos Dwarves in 4th edition and where they were and what happened to them?
Sure. Talk about Chaos Dwarves. So in the lore, the Chaos Dawi existed pretty much northeast of Karakraz, like very off in the great distance where the Ogre Kingdoms are, that kind of the Badlands. And they were beset upon by... It's not the Kurgan, I forget where they were, but it was a great chaos horde of barbarians, basically smashing through them and destroying their civilization as they knew it. And they sent help for the dwarfs, but the regular dwarfs couldn't get there in time despite their best efforts. So they ultimately turned to chaos to save them. And normally, dwarfs don't usually follow chaos or ever really follow chaos, but they worship Hesed, who is an aspect of some of the Chaos gods. Hey, puppy. He's a god of blood and fire, sacrifice, industry. Exactly what you would expect for evil dwarfs, pretty much.
Hey, puppy.
Their temples are like giant factories with magma and demon engines and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Another unique thing to them is that because they worship chaos, chaos can give anyone the power of magic, including dwarves. So chaos dwarves can actually become very powerful sorcerers at a price. One of the big things about chaos dwarves is that because they were never meant to wield magic, they slowly turn to stone over time until they actually completely petrify and they're just trapped in a statue body.
It's very cool.
Yeah, so they're interesting. They're very very strong contrast to the regular Dawi, I would say, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they do a good job of preserving, clearly still being dwarfs whilst having that chaos aspect to them. It's really interesting.
Yeah, they're brutal. Just imagine how grudges for dwarves, but then they have no morals whatsoever, basically holding them back.
Yes. Whenever you read the Chaos Dwarf lore, it always seems so miserable, where they are, because they're in the worst part of the world. Everything's constantly on fire, or a giant swamp. They have to patrol it constantly. There's nothing really good going on. And they're making it worse somehow.
Well, they're making it worse because they're binding demons, and they're guys, what if we put a demon and put it in a train? What could go wrong?
Yeah. To be fair, it works out for them more often than it doesn't.
Yeah, it's true. Or be what if we made sentient lava and enslaved it?
Yes.
Why not, right?
Yes. And the Chaos Dwarves have had a bit of a funny history in Warhammer. They were a full army in 4th. They didn't have much support in later editions. And then they came back in Forge World's book called Tarmakon, and they were very different in that book than they were in the 4th edition book. The 4th edition and Tarmakon books aren't incompatible, but the Legendary Lord situation might be a bit funny.
Yeah, that tends to happen with Forge World, because Forge World just plays by its own rules and doesn't really have to do whatever they can do whatever they want, basically. And
yeah,
it's technically legal, but it's just one of those weird things.
Yeah, I mean, Forge World is a pretty great. They make some pretty great books, but they can be a bit confusing sometimes.
Yeah, it's tough because like they're not released concurrent with normal Warhammer, so it tends to cause a lot of problems. I think.
Hmm. Well, do we want to get onto the legendary lords and who they are, and we'll
Yeah.
denote where they came from. So the first legendary lord we'll talk about is, I think, maybe the most likely, or if not one of the most likely, then the most likely, and it is Drazorov the Ashen, who was a
Yes.
chaos dwarf sort of. He was a commander slash caster hybrid. He could take a great Taurus mount. Uh, he had a ton of special rules, but he could do like Law of Hashut, which is the Chaos Dwarf unique law of magic, and he was also a pretty good combatant.
Yeah. I think he'll also probably be more likely than what was it? I think Goroth the Cruel, because Goroth never had a model, and he does.
Yes, Drazorth is, I think, the only Chaos Dwarf model you would still find today easily. Because I think Forge World might still sell him. I actually haven't checked, but he has a really cool, like, Great Taurus mount. So you can kind of think of this guy as the Karl Franz equivalent for the Chaos Dwarfs.
Yeah. If Carl Franz was also a wizard.
Better comparison then might be he's kind of like the Malekith of the Chaos Dwarfs.
Yeah, Malekith is very good. He's got like a giant winged mount, and he's a powerful wizard.
Yeah, good in combat too. So on the tabletop, he had a thing called the Hellshard Amulet, which gave him a ward save. And the funny thing about it was, if he passed his ward save, I think it was if he passed it, then it did damage to things around it. And in my notes, I've put, "Please not a Mortis Engine. Please don't make him a Mortis Engine. That would be awful."
I think it was actually more of a Thorns effect. So whenever a wound did get through, he hit something bad.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that sounds more right. But I'm just worried they will turn it into a Mortis Engine effect.
No more Mortis engines. Remove all Mortis engines.
It would be kind of cool if he became a Mortis Engine at like maybe 25% health, like when he was really low on health. That would be a bit more balanced because it would mean that, he is doing damage, but he will die soon.
You know what I think it would be good? Imagine Mistwalker's Barrage as a good ability, but on a cooldown whenever he takes damage.
That would be good. Yeah, that would be excellent. Maybe the cooldown could be linked to how much damage he takes as well.
Yeah.
That would be, an interesting ability. They'd have to program it, but it could be interesting.
For an iconic legendary lore, I hope they would do something like that.
Yeah, I feel like Legendary Lords, especially with Imrek, have had new mechanics, like either in campaign or in battle. So I feel like the bar is being put ever higher for what Legendary Lords are expected to do.
Yeah, which I'm fine with. Honestly, they should be. They should be like really special.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I like the way they've gone with Legendary Lords and making them feel unique and giving them more things. Or just making them unlike anything else in the game. It's nice.
Mm-hmm.
So the second thing he had was the Demon Spike Crucible, which made casting easier for him whenever he killed an enemy wizard. So it essentially made him a better caster when he killed enemy wizards. I don't know how they translate this. It could be like it could be a way of increasing his winds of magic whilst reducing an enemy's winds of magic. It could be
That would
quite
be fine.
it could be quite cool if it did have a direct translation where if he killed an enemy caster, he would get like a permanent increase to his Winds of Magic charge rate.
Yeah, I like something like that. I actually really like Winds of Magic nerf or buff abilities. I
Yeah,
think they're really powerful in some matchups. I think they're pretty undervalued by people.
yeah, and I think like him being a caster, a combat lord hybrid, it would be a really cool like a way to support that by making it that if he could kill a caster, he did get his good Winds of Magic recharge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And then the final thing he had was the Graven Scepter, which gave him magic attacks. So I think he'll have magic attacks. That's very easy to implement. And a bonus to hit, which I think will just mean he'll have some kind of stealth buff that will give him magic attacks and increase his melee attack, maybe, or increase his weapon strength.
yeah. I mean, the Graven Scepter is kind of like one of those like very classic things where it's like get wounded on a die regardless of toughness. I don't think they've really translated that too well into Total War. I feel like the best equivalent I've seen for that is probably Galmaraz, I would say.
Yeah, I think he'll have something very similar to that, like a self buff makes him very strong. Kind of a Warhammer 1-ish ability, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, do you want to move on to the next one?
Yeah, I'll do. I'll talk about a Astrogoth, whatever his name is. I'm tired.
So unfortunately, Astrogoth has no cool like painting or image. They only have his like old model.
Yeah, it's so old.
Yeah.
But Astrogoth is very cool because he is a super old, I think the oldest living chaos sorcerer dwarf, which means he's almost entirely made of stone. I think just like his torso and head are not petrified. So what he did was he actually encased himself in a mech robot body to account for that. So like he's a I'm not kidding, he's like a mech chaos dwarf sorcerer.
He's kind of the Ikit Claw of the Chaos Dwarf roster.
Yeah, so like he's kind of at that point where he's almost like basically Donzo, but he's still really powerful, despite the fact that like he can't move his limbs anymore. But the thing is, though, that makes him like actually super tough because he's in a mech. So it's like imagine like I don't know, imagine a Thorgrim who's also a full caster.
Yeah,
like he's big and chonky. He's got access to Lore of Hassett. And the big thing is his like actual mechoid body like punches really hard back in the oldie days. So like it's kind of funny. He's like a really powerful melee combatant. I think he had like a killing blow back in the day, which is pretty interesting. He's not very fast though, because again he's like a steam driven like mech body. But I still think that makes him honestly pretty interesting, all things considered. You don't really see something like that.
I hope they take a bit of creative liberty and make the mech really big.
Yeah, that would be fun. Just
Like,
make him a big, chunky, large character.
I feel like if they made it bigger, he'd be a sort of weirdly equivalent to Durthu in terms of like he's a caster, he can hit hard, he's has good like he has a reasonable access to spells.
Oh yeah, he could be like the dwarf Durthu. Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Yeah, it'd be cool.
Yeah, he's just super tanky. He's just an interesting character because honestly, how often do you see something like so cyberpunk really in or steampunk in Warhammer? You don't see it too often.
Yeah, you have to go to like the Skaven to get something sort of similar to him aesthetically.
Yeah, that's kind of the fun thing about Chaos Dwarfs is like they have like that mad science of the Skaven, but it's dwarf style, so like it actually like works well all the time. You know, we're a Skaven, like because they're rats, they'll build something and if it works once, they consider it a great success. But like a dwarf isn't happy unless something works 100 times in a row.
Yeah, they're a really interesting sort of hybrid of Persian aesthetics and like Victorian era aesthetics. They kind of combine both in a really interesting way. And I'm looking forward to seeing them. Hi, Bob.
They got their hats, their legendary hats.
Yes, the big hats. I hope we get big hats too.
Yeah, the legendary Babylonian hats.
Yes.
That takes the bag.
Okay. So we'll move on to the third legendary lord, and this is Zatan the Black, who is, as you might be able to see by the image of him, he is a 4th edition character. He didn't show up in Tamarkan, and we haven't really seen much of him since 4th edition. However, he... Oh, I think there's something up with your mic.
Is that better?
I don't know. Can we... chat, can you tell me if you can hear Griff?
Hello?
I think there might be a little bit of background static. You should be fine.
Okay.
Okay, so Zatan is, I think, a really good candidate for a free LC Lord because because in the 4th edition book, he didn't really have that many rules. I mean, he could take a lot of special, like, magic items, but he didn't really have that much going on with him. So I feel like he'll be a combat lord more than anything. Maybe he'll have some good buffs around him. He'll be a sort of footlord character. I guess a Belligar equivalent, as damning as that might be already. He could ride a Lamassu or a Great Taurus. So he'll be better than a lot of the normal dwarf lords because he will have that ability to get where he needs to go. Maybe allow him to cause terror, since he did cause terror in the cause terror on the tabletop. And I think they're just going to have to make some stuff up for him because I think they're going to have to give him special rules from the based on magic items that Chaos Dwarf have previously had, because he actually didn't have that much going on with him. He was just sort of a commander figure.
Yeah, his gimmick was that he could carry extra magic items. So maybe that might be what they go with.
Yeah, just give him a ton of magic items he can use. Yeah, I could see that. He was very sort of 4th edition. He didn't have like tons and tons of special rules.
Yeah, they didn't really start doing special rules, I think, in abundance to like 5th edition.
Yeah. So that's him. Do you want to go on to our last legendary lord, who is more interesting and could be a full DLC?
Yeah, Gorditz.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Gordit's Backstabber is a Hobgoblin chieftain. And I guess we didn't really mention this, but Chaos Dwarves have like Hobgoblin slaves. They use like a ton of slave labor, which kind of also makes them very similar to Skaven in some other ways. But he's like a Hobgoblin chieftain. He rides a giant wolf. His thing though was that he was lucky, and that kind of translated into almost a really powerful feel no pain for people who are familiar with tabletop. But I think he'll be fun because it wasn't very expensive in tabletop because he's a hobgoblin, obviously. But I think he'll like fulfill a very different role, like more of a finesse role. Because honestly, dwarves are not known for their finesse, so that's something that he can kind of contribute as like I don't know, like a fast, like sneaky stabbing lord versus like the big, like lumbering dwarf lords. If that makes sense, he might even be a hero. He'd be a good hero, honestly, too.
Yeah. The one thing I'm worried about is like he was a lord, and Creative Assembly makes legendary heroes into lords. So I feel like he would be a lord.
Yeah, Bob. Basically, whenever he was on his last wound, he had a 4-up feel no pain,
which is like a 50% ward save.
Yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah, it was even stronger back when he had it, and when it was a bit rarer.
Yeah, it's like a hyper cloak of Isha of sorts.
That's a good way of describing it. Yeah, be like if Grom got his lucky banger full time when he was on like 200 HP.
Yeah, it'd be very unpleasant.
Yeah, I like the idea of him being a hero, but I have a feeling he'll be a DLC that comes with a bunch of Hobgoblin units.
Yeah, I feel like there's going to be some core Hobgoblin units, but I can definitely see like there'd be a DLC fleshing them out.
Yeah, like specialist Hobgoblin types.
Yeah.
Bob, he will not have an ITP aura.
I hope there are no more ITP auras.
If we never see an ITP aura again, we'll be happy.
Can we just remove ITP auras and Morris engines from the game?
Be good. So those are, I think, are our legendary lord picks. I think Drazoth is the most likely by far, and Astragoth are the two who I think will be core legendary lords, and then we'll see the rest as we go along.
Yeah, then you'll probably have like your generic Lamastu riding Chaos sorcerer.
Yeah. So we mentioned earlier that Chaos Dwarfs have their own lore of magic, and this is the lore of Hashir. So you can think of their relationship to Hashir, if you're not familiar with it. It's a bit like Skaven and the Horned Rat, how that even though they are part of Chaos, they have their own specific god who doesn't necessarily get along with the other gods. Chaos Dwarfs get along with other Chaos factions better than Skaven get along with other Chaos factions, though.
Yeah, basically, if you have gold or slaves, they'll trade with you for them.
Yes. Though they don't take Skaven slaves, because apparently every time they took them, the Skaven just used it to put like saboteurs and assassins in the Chaos Dwarf strongholds.
Yeah, that or they just die too fast.
Yeah. So the Law of Hashut was a unique law specifically for the Chaos Dwarfs. It was all about sort of fire and damage and things like that. And I'll go through the spells they had in it. The passive ability was a thing called Killing Fire. And the way it worked was it did, I think, more damage to things that were weak to fire to represent it was a sort of sentient fire that can really like do a lot of damage to those sort of things. So I'm wondering if hopefully they didn't just make it like Kindle Flame where everything gets like a weakness to fire after a cast. I was thinking maybe allow if you take the law that it allows overcast fire spells to never suffer an overcast. So we'll see there's a lot of spells to do with fire. Maybe it just reduces overcast chance. That could be fun.
I think it depends because like the whole like sorcerer's cursed overcasting thing is a pretty big thing in 8th edition for Chaos Dwarves.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of a funny one since I guess they could also just do it with anything that's weak to fire gets like it lasts longer than Kindle Flame and gives them like a much bigger weakness to fire. So like Dryads would go from 25% weakness to fire to say maybe 50%.
I could see something like that potentially.
Or to differentiate it from Kindle Flame, which already almost does that, maybe even like 75%. So spells they might have is number 1 was Burning Wrath, which is a magic missile attack. I think it's a pretty simple translation. It was just a magic missile. I was thinking maybe it could have shorter range but do more damage than Fireball.
Yeah, that would be nice. Because Fireball is kind of obnoxious with how far its range is.
Yeah, and it's tracking. So maybe it could be like a short range Amber Spear that does tons of damage.
Yeah, it could be that, or like maybe like a Fire Shem's Burning Gaze. I like Shem's Burning Gaze, but it's not the best.
I think if they made it all one projectile, it would be a bit better.
Yeah, I like multi-projectiles in theory, but the problem is because they're multiple hits, resistances really nerf them hard.
Yes.
In case for people who don't know what I mean by that, it's basically if a fireball hits you, it's one instance of like say minus 15%, but if like Shem's Burning Gaze hits you, it's 6 instances of damage being reduced by 15%. So you take a lot less damage if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's kind of like how one can like physical resistance protects way better against like archers than it does against cannons.
Yeah, because you still get like chunked for a ton of like single hits.
Yes. So second spell is Dark Subjugation, which it was really strange on tabletop. It was if you failed the leadership test against it, you had a -3 leadership test for the rest, like stat for the rest of the game. So I have a feeling this is going to translate into some form of Doom and Darkness equivalent.
Yeah.
Where it'll be a big leadership debuff.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You don't really see those abilities too often. Like the most I can really think of that being is in Witch Hunters back in 3rd edition really had that. But I like leadership bombs. I think they're a fun mechanic because they're I don't know. I don't really like terror because terror like tends to either work or it doesn't. But being able to like dunk someone's leadership is always good if that makes sense. I just think it's a very reliable ability too because there's some spells where it's like I don't know if I'll ever get my value out of it, but like being able to bomb someone's leadership is like usually something you can always get value out of. And I like spells that aren't damage that you can still use for value if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd agree. So third spell is Curse of Hashut, which is just AoE damage. I think it should be like maybe a slightly better Flock of Doom with like less radius. That could be fun.
Yeah.
Fourth one is Ash Storm, which so it's kind of interesting. It was a slow and debuff And the really interesting thing about it was where if you were a wizard and you were caught in it, it was meant to be like you were blinded. So wizards could only cast spells on themselves. So if you had a fire wizard, they couldn't cast fireball. They could only cast fire cloak on themselves as opposed to anything else. So I think they probably won't go that far with it, and they could maybe just make it do the blinded debuff as well as a slow, like a slow and blinded.
I think that could be really powerful if it's like if it's a big AOE and then like whenever it's cast, it tags everything. And even if they move out, they still stay blinded.
Yeah.
It also gives the fire weakness, I think, too. But didn't it also give fire weakness?
I believe it did. Yeah, there was there was a lot of debuffs on it.
Yeah, so I think that could be good as long as the winds of magic aren't really high. One of the big problems I feel like with debuffs is that their winds of magic are too high compared to like big damage spells. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and healing as well tends to be buffs and debuffs tend to fall out of favor when you compare it to well, I could just heal.
Yeah, exactly.
Law of Life suffers from that a lot, where how like Shield of Thorns is a good buff, but you need regrowth and Earthblood.
Yeah, it's like I could. It's like it's kind of tough. It's like could I mitigate 1500 damage with the Shield of Thorns? Maybe, or I could just heal the 1500 damage.
Yeah. So fifth spell, another direct damage. It was called the Hellhammer, and I imagine this is just going to look like a giant hammer, like smashing down on things, kind of like Foot of Cork, but Chaos Dwarfy.
That'd be fun. Maybe like a wind spell where like a hammer pendulum.
Yeah, like Swordwind, the Dark Elf one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that could be fun.
And then the final one was Flames of Asgore, which was a direct damage blast. It was like a really good scorch. Is the only way I can really describe it.
Yeah, good scorch. Yeah, basically, right?
It was like a scorch was already good, but it was like a really really good scorch. And the way I was thinking this could maybe work is make it super short range, comes directly from the caster, but it does like huge damage to SEMs who are caught in like the narrow template of it.
Didn't it like also instantly have a chance to instantly kill like whatever it actually landed on in tabletop?
Yes, that was why I was thinking the big damage to SEMs because they don't do this in Total War like at all. I don't think. But on tabletop there were certain abilities where it was like save or die.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully they don't translate that because I think it would be. I think it's good they don't translate those because any ability with the power to like one shot things based on RNG, I think it's really unfun to play against.
I wouldn't mind things that punish SEMs more though. I feel like there should be more things that like hit SEMs harder than the other things.
Yeah, that's not just like Plague of Rust. Not Plague of Rust,
Yeah.
sorry. What's it called? Final Trans.
Yeah, I would like more things that like just hit single entity monsters harder than other stuff to kind of encourage more play besides them.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Seems like a good way of doing it. And I think you were going to do the heroes, weren't you?
Yeah. So for heroes, let me get my list out here. I think we're going to see a few of them. I think for sure we're going to be seeing a Demonsmith Sorcerer. So basically just the hero equivalent of the generic caster lord. So pretty much every faction that has casting has like lord version and like baby version. So I think we'll definitely see them. And they're going to be just probably like tabletop where they have like tons of armor, super tanky, but not very fast.
Yes.
Honestly, they'll probably just be a good runesmith, I guess is how I'll put it.
How are Chaos Dwarfs going to feel when runesmiths are still what they are right now, and like demon smiths and lore of Heshut priests have their own lore of magic, and it's all really useful.
So as a dwarf main, I am legitimately concerned that Chaos Dwarfs are just going to be Dwarfs Plus, not really have just there won't be a reason to play Dwarves when Chaos Dwarfs come out, if that makes sense. They're just going to have all the things Dwarves do, but better with magic.
Yeah.
So I'm legitimately concerned they're just going to basically replace Dwarves with the faction. But you never know, right?
On the plus side, it could set a new bar for how good Dwarves have to be when they get reworked.
If they get reworked. That's a big if.
I feel like they will eventually, because they are starting to show their age.
Yeah, but I don't know if CA honestly cares about that. I don't know.
I feel like at CA, some factions just get crapped on eternally, and they don't care. But then it's Skaven are there going, oh, well, we really would like this one unit, and they're like, don't worry, babies, you'll get it soon.
And then Dwarfs are like, we still have Prospector's Eyeglass. Can you help us?
After we've given Skaven everything, yes.
Yeah, it's like, send help, please.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that we'll get a Lord level and a hero like Lord of Hashut Caster.
Yeah, so then I also think we'll have the Thane equivalent, which is a Castellan for Chaos Dwarfs. I think they're also just going to be a better version of a Thane. Like, I mean, look at like the Black Orc Big Boss. He set such a powerful precedent for like new foot heroes or like mounted heroes. Like, I'm really kind of worried that like the Infernal Castellan is just going to be like the Black Orc Big Boss of Dwarfs, where he's just like super powerful. Yeah, he's expensive, but he's just so good that like you'd be silly not to take him. You know what I mean?
I feel like one of the things that's going to be a problem for old dwarf heroes compared to Chaos Dwarf heroes is Chaos Dwarf heroes will be able to take mounts.
Yes, that's a big problem.
Yes, especially very powerful flying mounts.
Yeah, the little Masu and the Great Taurus. Oh
Yeah.
man.
And that's going to make it very hard for dwarves to look competitive when their lords are still so slow and footbound.
Yeah, and if they don't get them anything to help with it, it's gonna, like I said, it's gonna be bad. I am legitimately concerned Chaos Dwarfs are just going to eclipse regular dwarfs completely.
As much as I joke, I am also concerned for that.
But let's not talk about my misery. Let's talk about Chaos Dwarfs some more.
Yep.
I'll get the book out and we'll talk about it later.
Nice. I think I'm slightly worried we'll have Chaos Dwarf Coast. That's my worry.
Yeah, but their units are still breakable, and they won't have summons. They also won't have healing.
Probably, yeah.
So a lot of the things that make Coast so powerful, you just won't see, if that makes sense.
Yes. Do you think we'll see Chaos Dwarf Bombers? Well,
they do have hand bombs and kind of stuff, but again, I don't think they'll be as strong as Coast Bombers, because Coast Bombers will keep throwing bombs to the last man, where you could break Chaos Dwarf Bombers.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So you want to carry on with the heroes if there are any more?
Yeah, so there's a few more. There's a Hobgoblin Khan. So I think he's just going to be kind of like the baby version of the Hobgoblin Lord I mentioned. They're like, they're kind of tricksy. They wear light armor. They can wear Great Wolves. Think of them as like maybe a more beefy version of a Goblin Big Boss.
Yeah.
That's kind of what they're doing.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And then finally, there's going to be the Bull Centaur hero, which I think would be pretty cool. Think of them as kind of like dwarf Centaurs, pretty much. I think he'll be a fun, like a Centaur hero, kind of like maybe like almost like a useful Gorbel that doesn't get like launched around everywhere.
Yes, I would definitely agree with that.
Or maybe like a Shaggoth hero, kind of, because they kind of like a Shaggoth's heavy armor, heavy weapons kind of thing.
That's a really good equivalent. Yeah. I think he'll be AP anti-large and fill that role as like the SEM to fight other SEMs.
I think so, because on tabletop they could take great weapons. They could also do sword and ward, but you could give them magic item and great weapons. So I think if there's a great weapon, they're probably going to go with that, just because I feel like in general, CA tends to ignore shielded variants and gives them great weapons usually.
Yes, because generally the great weapons are slightly more useful on SEMs, I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
But that is it for what I think they'll do for heroes.
So we'll move on to the infantry now. Oh, let me get rid of this one. Okay. So for the infantry, I think that we'll see basic Chaos Dwarf Warriors. I think they'll be like just regular Dwarf Warriors, but maybe slightly more elites.
Yeah.
There's not really much to say on those. They'll have shields, they'll have axes, they'll have high leadership. They'll be a very good front line. I then think we'll also get we'll get an Infernal Guard. The Infernal Guard are a funny one because they're kind of like Slayers in their lore, but they aren't unbreakable and they have ranged weapons and armor.
I feel like they're more like almost Ironbreaker equivalent.
Yeah, well, in terms of how they play, yes, but in terms of like their background, I'd say they're kind of like a Slayer cult.
Yeah, I can see that.
So Infernal Guard are interesting because they have because they're not unbreakable. They're really good in melee combat, and they have good like AP ranged attacks. So I think the best equivalent that we have to these already could be Sepulchral Stalkers, and they'll be like a melee foot version of those. So they have a good short range attack, but then they're actually quite good in melee too, and they have great weapons.
You know what I think would be cool if they were like a heavily armored Free Company militia almost.
That would be it. Yeah, that's also a good idea. AP Free Company. So maybe like they're all like Sterling's Revenge.
With tons of armor. Yeah, oh no.
Yeah. But they won't have ITP, which is the big thing.
Yeah. It's just the terror of like dwarves slowly walking at you with fire while moving. Oh no.
Yeah. Because their axes, the way they're designed, they are meant to be moving forward whilst doing that.
Yeah, oh boy.
And then they have the Infernal Guard Iron Sworn, who are, I'd say, a pure sword and board melee version of that.
Yeah.
So maybe kind of like they'd be like a hammer equivalent, or like maybe they'd be the Ironbreaker equivalent. And
they could be like the Longbeards, maybe.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, I'd agree with that. And then there's not actually a lot of Chaos Dwarf infantry units. So the next one is the Hobgoblins, who I think they'll be cheap goblin infantry with decent leadership, so they'll be more elite than regular goblins. They probably should either be really cheap chaff and not do anything, but Hobgoblins are better than goblins, so I think they'll be like maybe 350 gold.
Yeah, I feel like they should be. I feel like they're going to be a kind of a tough balancing act. Getting them right in that kind of like needle point where they're not as good as goblins, but they're not as good as the orc boys.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And then they had an equivalent of the Sneaky Git, so I think it'll be a bit like the Smoke Bomb Goblins. What they
Nasty
call
Skulkers.
Yeah, they'll be a bit like Nasty Skulkers. They'll have AP. Maybe they'll be less defensive and more offensive, and I think they need to cost like 500 gold ish. Maybe more.
See that? It's kind of weird because like they used to be able to take Black Orcs, but I don't think in 8th edition you can take them.
Well, they couldn't take any of their orc unit. They could only take hobgoblins. All of the enslaved like orcs and goblins have gone.
Which I think is probably for the best.
I would agree. I don't want them to have enslaved orcs and enslaved goblins, because my feeling would be that it would essentially be an orc and goblin army with some Chaos Dwarf support, rather than a Chaos Dwarf army with like hobgoblin support.
I don't think we need to worry too much though, because this is from the era when undead used to also be combined. That's why like vampire accounts kind of have a weird roster, because they were all like split apart into their own rosters, if that makes sense. So it should just be the undead book in the oldie days.
Yes. So I think the last infantry unit will be like hobgoblin archers. They'll be hobgoblin archers. It's literally all I've put in my notes. Hobgoblin archers. They'll be hobgoblins with bows. Maybe they'll be like peasant archers, and I think the only thing we need to really worry about is what if they're given a poison variant and it's really cheap.
I would honestly imagine them as goblin archers with just like a little bit more to them. So maybe you can take a poison variant, which I think is fine, just because dwarfs don't really have as much high mass. I guess actually chaos dwarfs will have high mass. They'll have Lamasus and tons of other stuff. So
yeah, I'd agree.
But as long as they're on like a kind of breakable unit, I don't think it'd be too much of a problem, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Do you want to move on to the next units?
Sure. I was going to do ranged, right? Let's see here.
Yeah.
So there were a few ranged units. In general, though, you had your chaos dwarfs with blunderbusses, which are old-timey guns that kind of had a flared muzzle to them. And the idea was they would try and spread out the shot, which actually didn't happen, but they didn't know that back then, so we'll just kind of ignore that. Think of them as like fantasy shotguns.
Yes.
And imagine evil dwarfs in full plate walking at you with shotguns, and you can imagine how terrifying that'll probably be, and how awesome it will also be. So I think blunderbusses will be like short range, high AP, kind of like you know how Coast has the hand cannoneers. I think you might see something like that, or like a shorter range thunderers that output more damage. You might see maybe. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that'd be a good place for them to be.
Yeah. So then you'll have your hobgoblin archers. I think besides that, they didn't really have too much other like actual ranged units. Most of their ranged powers in their artillery.
Yes. So we'll go on to the monsters, then we'll get to artillery last, because I think artillery is like the defining part of their faction.
Yeah.
Okay, so for their monsters and cav, the first one to talk about is Wolf Riders. I think these need to be a lot better than Forest Goblins, Wolf Rider, or was it Wolf Riders for Goblins?
Yeah.
I think these should actually be reasonable like cav. Maybe they should be about equivalent, slightly better Norscan Ice Wolves without the slow, in terms of like their model count and their damage output.
I'd be okay with it. I like Goblin Riders just because they're cheap, but they have tons of models.
Yes.
That's what I like about them.
Yeah. Though Hobgoblins were always more elite than regular goblins.
That's true. We can say cheap for a dwarf unit.
Yes. The next thing I have on the list are the Bull Centaurs, who are the Chaos Dwarf Heavy Cav. And I think this might be one of the things that defines them in opposition to regular dwarves, the fact that they actually do have like a fairly fast heavy cavalry unit. I think they should have a sword and axe version and a great weapon version.
Yeah, so I think Bull Centaurs are probably going to be one of the defining things of the roster, just because dwarves regularly have no mass, so having AP mass with good armor is probably going to be pretty amazing, honestly.
Yeah, they might even be kind of how Rat Ogres define Skaven, because that's Skaven's mass. They might be like a slightly better version of that.
I hope there are variants, though.
Yes.
I think it would be nice to see an anti-large version, and then like an AP version, or I think that would be really nice. I think that would give them some good utility.
Yes. Then in terms of the rest of what they've got, is I think they'll have feral manticores. It's a manticore. It'll work like every other manticore in the game. It'll rampage. It'll be a bit too cheap. It'll kill things. It's pretty much what a manticore is. And then moving on from that, I think they'll have the thing that's really exciting is they will have SEMs too. So they'll have the Kadai, which are essentially they're basically demons who have been put in magma because the Chaos Dwarfs thought that would be funny, and they succeeded to everyone's horror.
No one told them they couldn't.
No, so they did. um, and no one's going to tell CA they can't, so they will. So I think they'll translate the same way demons translate into the Chaos roster right now, like Sartorial, so they'll be unbreakable. They had a rule called Blazing Body, which meant things took damage when they were in combat with them. Again, please not a Mortis Engine. I hope it's an AoE explosion, is what I hope it is, and not a constant drain.
That'd be nice.
The AoE explosion could be good too if they make them maybe a bit smaller, and they don't want them to get bogged down, so they give them that blast so they can get around places.
It could just be like little explosions that go off and it recharges as they're in combat.
Yeah, I think that would be a great way of doing it instead of a constant damage over time effect.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So the other thing that was really strange was they had a thing called Burning Bright, which was after turn 2, they would start taking damage if they failed the toughness test to represent the fact that they were like burning out and like eventually leaving the world. I'd like to see them make this an active choice, so you could have your Kadai running around, doing how it would normally do, but you have like an active you can turn on that lasts till the rest of the battle, where once you turn it on, it gets a massive buff, but then it starts like fading away, or sort of gets treated like a summon at that point, but like a longer lasting summon.
Yeah.
Maybe like Malice is what I'm thinking. It could be like...
It'd be fun.
Maybe you can get like a small heal when it does that too, to give people more of an incentive to use it.
I wouldn't mind that. I like things that give you choices and options and like trade-offs.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. So the other thing, they had like various versions of Kadai. They also had Kadai Destroyers, which causes, I think, regular Kadai shouldn't cause terror, but the Kadai Destroyer does, and probably have better stats.
Yeah, I could dig it.
Because I don't want there to be too much terror. So the other one they had was a Taurus, who were essentially giant bulls. They're like, imagine like manticores, but better, really, and they're cows. So it's a huge flying SEM. It does flaming damage. So I think they should have a huge fire resist. And the weird thing is, on tabletop, when it was targeted by a Law of Fire spell, it actually healed from it.
Pretty cool.
I hope they leave that in, but I feel like they won't. I feel like people just won't take Law of Fire against them, so maybe it'll be a bit pointless. But it's a nice flavor thing that I hope we get to keep.
I think in general, Dwarf, the Chaos Dwarf unit should just have fire resistance, kind of like how Dwarfs have magic resistance.
Yes, I definitely agree. It could be cool if they gave them like maybe a bit of physical resist, but gave them magic weakness too. But I kind of don't like stacking resistances, so I prefer your idea. Fire resist. The last unit I think there is to talk about would be the Chaos Siege Giant, which is like an armored giant. It's an armored giant. It's cool.
Yep, he's got tons of weapons. He's like a giant, but good.
Yeah, basically. We might get those too. But that's the monsters. Do you want to talk about the exciting part, which is the artillery?
Yeah, so this is where the Chaos Dwarfs really shine, and it's their demonic war engines, basically. So the Chaos Dwarfs, as you've seen, is like the Hell Cannon on the Chaos roster is Chaos Dwarfs. So they make infernal engines, and I think my favorite of the bunch is probably the Iron Daemon. It's imagine basically a giant train that they bound a demon into and then put guns on it and they just ride it around the battlefield.
Yeah.
It's absolutely absurd, but it's also just absolutely amazing. And I think it'll be a really fun, imagine like a steam tank, but like bigger, more guns, and also it can like spew out like soul-eating fire.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, so that's going to be really fun. There's also a few other ones they have, but obviously I think the Iron Demon is like the most popular and probably the coolest.
I think
They
it'll be
also have
big.
magma cannons, which are like basically they're flame cannons equivalent. I think those will be nice. I hope they rework flame weapons on artillery so they actually aim correctly.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've ever used a flame cannon or like seen a flame cannon in work, but
Uh,
right now it targets the edge of formation, which is completely counterproductive for a splash weapon like a flame weapon.
yeah.
So other thing I'm actually really excited for is the Death Shrieker rocket launcher.
Mhm.
So the Death Shrieker is a bit different because it actually has different ammo types. So you can either load it with a missile of living fire that like arcs out and tries to eat people, or like normal explosive ordnance. So it's like imagine a Hellstorm rocket battery that shoots hell cannon blasts that fork.
Mhm.
So
Oh,
I think that'll be fun because I like Hellstorm rocket batteries. I wish they were a little bit better. I think the Death Shrieker might be that kind of like missile unit we've been looking for that'll be good if that makes sense.
I hope if they do that, I hope they adjust it so it's not like a Casket of Souls, which always hits, and I hope they make it like a soft lock on, so it's more accurate, but not ridiculously so.
It wasn't the most accurate. I think, ironically, the soft lock on of hell cannons actually like can be counterproductive sometimes, especially at close range, which is kind of
Mm.
funny.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. The reason why there's actually a pretty good reason to take the differences. Like for the AoE like homing fire, it did a lot less damage to account for the fact that it was homing, whereas like regular demolition rockets did way more, had higher strength and more damage to account for the fact that they are harder to hit, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So I wouldn't mind seeing variants of these for which ones you want and which trade-off you want. Do you want more accurate, less damage, or like risky, big damage, but it might miss kind of thing?
yeah, I think those would be great. Like, because I really like the idea of having like artillery with lots of different ammos, so you can adjust. So if you want the artillery piece, you can still adjust it for what you need.
Yeah, kind of like how bolt throwers have the different modes.
Yes. Well, that'd be cool. If it was an active you could change in battle.
Yeah, I think that would be fun. I feel like there should be more things like that, honestly.
Mhm.
And then we finally we have the Dreadquake mortar, which is basically every mortar they had is basically Queen Bess as a unit.
Yes.
So just imagine like a unit of 3 Queen Besses, and you can see why I'm already excited for this.
Yes. And everyone else is terrified.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because like they're really close to Queen Bess because they reloaded slowly, but also any units it hit had to make a test or move slowly. What does that sound like?
Oh no.
Yeah, what does it sound? Yeah, right.
It
And
seems
they
like.
just did.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
seems
but it
like
was just
so
so
weird.
good. Had a huge range, had really good strength on impact, movement, and splash. Did big wounds. Had a slow. It's like everything you want in artillery, basically.
Mhm.
And there's going to be so many of them.
They might downgrade it to just having one model per unit to account for this, and like make it a bit beefier so it can't get sniped by fireballs.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Because I think
I
having
could
three
definitely
Queen
see.
Besses would be pretty obnoxious.
I can dream though, right?
You can play on like ultra unit scale and get fire.
Yeah, that's pretty much the Chaos Dwarf artillery roster. It's pretty fun.
I really hope that they implement it better than like maybe artillery is now, where like for some reason Brett trebuchets can win artillery duels, and I hope like people have to really commit to winning an artillery duel with the Chaos Dwarfs. They can't just win like bolt throwers and that'll cover them.
Yeah, Brett Trebs are pretty interesting. I remember the first time someone brought Trebs against me in Coast, I was like, man, what are they doing? And I went, oh no, what are they doing?
Yes, Trebs are a funny one. Maybe
Yeah.
the homing version of the missiles could be good for like winning artillery duels.
That would be nice.
And that would be their
Yeah.
niche. Like, they're really good at killing cav and artillery models, and the other versions, like the anti-infantry version.
I definitely think such a heavy artillery-focused faction needs some way to deal with artillery sniping.
Yes.
I'm looking at you, bolt throwers.
So maybe like an anti-bolt throw around. That's called
Yeah.
something different and not the please no.
Nothing makes you sad like a bolt thrower killing your flame cannon or something.
Yes, that's another reason flame cannons just aren't very good.
Yeah.
Or a
Womp womp.
or a trebuchet killing your hellblaster.
Yeah, that's a big womp right there.
Yeah. Alright, but very excited for Chaos Dwarfs. I think it'll be an interesting sort of Skaven Dwarf hybrid of all things.
Yeah, I think they should be pretty spicy, all things considered. They're
Yes.
probably just gonna be better dwarfs.
The spiciest dwarfs.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that was pretty good. We managed to keep it under an hour this week. Chaos Dwarfs never had the biggest roster, but so I think they're going to end up making up units, like they're going to have to make up units for the Wood Elf DLC.
Yeah, I'm fine with that though. Like, I don't mind Chaos Dwarfs being fleshed out more.
No, I agree. I think, especially with what they did with Coast and what they've done with the other units they've made up, or the ones they've had to take inspiration for, I think they've done a good job, so I'm fine with them making up units.
Yeah, I really like Coast, even if people will scree at me for saying that.
I like the design and concept of Coast. I don't like playing against Coast.
That's a more fair way to say it, I suppose.
Yeah, I like looking at Coast. I don't like watching Coast in action.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Nerf Luther, please.
Nerf Luther. Make Foot Luther viable and Deathshriek Terrorgeist Luther bad, please.
I'd like to see the regular Deathshriek Terrorgeist get some buffs, so there's a reason to take it.
Yeah, that would be cool. Maybe when the Coast nerf finally comes in, there'll be a couple of buffs, but we're getting off topic to
Yes, we are.
to Coast nerfs. No, it's a good one. I think next week we'll begin with demons, and we'll decide how we'll do demons at some point in the week.
Sounds good.
Okay, nice. So, thank you everyone for joining us. We will be back at some point. Keeping to schedule has been a bit harder than expected, but we will be back with another one probably in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's been tough. It's been so busy.
Yes, the Chaos Dwarf episode has been cast.
Not anymore.
No, we've broken the Chaos Dwarf curse. Well, we will see you next time.